our students. I hope you guys are doing well. With each day nearing the cat paper, I can I can feel it in my stomach how you guys must be feeling. But these are the kinds of jitters that we are trying to assuage, and which is why today I come up with another favorite topic of the CAT consortium, namely philosophy and economics. So I'm not going to do any small talk because I know how important all of this time is. So without any further ado, let us begin. First things first, we're going to walk ourselves through the information in the passage and then see the options, the answers, why an answer, why not. Let's start. The Hungarian folktale. The Hungarian folktale Petty Maid Ibronka terrified and tantalized me as a child. So the author was always very scared of this. In the story, the young Ebronka must tie herself to the devil with string in order to discover important truth. So if she wanted to, she had to tie herself with the devil. So I mean, something very eerie seems to be happening here. These days, as a PhD student in philosophy, I sometimes worry I've done the same. And then, the author just goes about by saying, as a PhD student, I feel I also do the same thing. I still believe in philosophy's capacity to seek truth, but I'm conscious that I've tethered myself to an academic heritage plagued by formidable demons. But then the author is very convinced that now even the philosophical area also has its own demons to itself. The demons of the academic philosophy come in familiar guises: exclusivity, hegemony, and investment in the myth of individual genius. And all of these demons, they come up with very familiar guises. So they have very familiar structures, namely exclusivity, hegemony, and the investment in the myth of the individual genius. As the ethicist Jill Hernandez notes, philosophy has been slower to change than many of its sister disciplines in the humanities. It may be a surprise to many given that theology and certainly religious studies tend to be inclusive, but philosophy is mostly resistant towards including diverse voices. So philosophy, on the other hand, is pretty resistant towards these diverse voices. Simultaneously, philosophy has grown increasingly specialized due to the pressure of professionalization, and this professionalization, because of which it has also become very pressurized. Academic zeroes in narrower and narrower topics in order to establish unique niches, and in the process, what was once a discipline that sought answers to humanity's most fundamental questions become a jargon riddle puzzle for a narrow group of insiders. And now it's become nothing but just a list of jargon riddled subject altogether. In recent years, canon expression has been a hot button topic as philosophers increasingly find the exclusivity of the field antithetical, to its universal aspiration. So in the recent years, these canon expressions, so canonical or canon basically means the rules, the tenets, the principles that we have. Now, it has become a hot button topic as philosophers increasingly find the exclusivity in the field antithetical to its universal aspiration. So there's a universal aspiration, but now whatever is happening in philosophy is in contradiction to all the things that one thought of. As J. Garfield remarks, it is as irrational to ignore everything not written in the Eurosphere as it would be to only read philosophy published on Tuesday. And to ignore everything not written in the Eurosphere is pretty much like reading philosophy on a Tuesday. And yet, academic philosophy largely has done that. And there is where the blame is. Philosophy has just done that. It is only in the past few decades that the mainstream has begun to engage seriously with the work of the women and the non-Western thinkers. It's only lately that, such engagement has started. Often this endeavor involves looking beyond the confines of what historically has been called philosophy. Often, all of this requires you to crane your neck up and look outside the genre of philosophy altogether. Expanding the canon generally isn't so simple as resurfacing a standard philosophical treaty in the style of white male contemporaries that happen to have been written by someone outside this demographic. And to be expanding this is not that easy because it's purely and it's majorly dominated by the white males. Sometimes this does happen, and in the case of Margaret Cavendish, 23 to 73, whose work has attracted increased recognition in recent years. But Cavendish was the Duchess of Newcastle, a royalist whose political theory criticizes social mobility as a threat to social order. But then there were inclusions. But again, the author says that she was the Duchess. Of course, there's going to be inclusion of that nature. She had access to instruction that was highly unusual for women outside her background, which lends her work a standard style and structure. And she had information, she had access. Obviously, she was privileged, she was entitled, which is why she had what she had. To find voices beyond this elite is often we have to look beyond the style and structure. And to be able to find more voices, you have to look outside these structures. Not everybody is as entitled as she was. Texts formerly classified as squarely theological have been among the first to attract significant renewed interest. Now, all of these texts that have been classified as squarely theological, so the theological ones are the ones who have taken the first spotlight. Female Catholic writers such as Teresa of Avila or Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, whose work had been largely ignored outside theological circles, are now being re-examined through philosophical lens. So they're re-examining all of the work. Likewise, philosophy departments are gradually including more work by Buddhist philosophers such as Dignaga and Ratnakirti, whose epistemological contributions have been of especial recent interest. And then there is, of course, inclusion of the Buddhist philosophers as well. Such thinkers may now sit on syllabi alongside Augustine and Aquinas, who, despite their theological bent, have long been considered worthy of philosophical engagement, and they have now been put onto the pedestal, such as the stalwarts of philosophy. On the topic of worthiness, I am wary of using the term philosophy as an honorific. So the author is wanting to be very careful. It is crucial that our interest in expanding the canon does not involve the implications that the philosophical confers a degree of rigor over the theological, literary, etc. And it's very important that you have to understand that we don't steal the spotlight, we don't steal the thunder of any other discipline altogether. To do so would be to engage in myopic and uninteresting debate over academic borders. And if you're doing this, you're being very short-sighted. That is how myopic is being used. My motivating question is not what the label of philosophy can confer upon these texts, but what these texts can bring to philosophy. It's not what philosophy can do, it's what they can do to philosophy. If philosophy seeks insight into the nature of such universal topics as reality, morality, art, and knowledge, it must seek input from those beyond the narrow view. If philosophy really has to, it needs to broaden its perspective, include more people. It can't just be a few, narrow few. That is what the passage is about. And with that, let's get on to the questions to see. All of the following align with the author's claim regarding the challenges and efforts of expanding the philosophical canon, except. So one of it is not. What is the one that is not? Simply resurfacing text in the style of traditional Western philosophy does not meaningfully broaden the canon. Now, this was a problem. Of course, this was a challenge. This is true. It can't be my answer. Philosophical departments increasingly integrate non-Western and female thinkers to enrich discourse. This is true. This was a challenge. This can't be. Labeling previously ignored text as philosophical automatically ensures its intellectual rigor. No, that's not what has been talked about. So this definitely can be an answer for me because this is an except. Again, no such idea of automatically doing it. Canon expression often involves re-examining work historically classified as theological or literary. Well, yes, this was also because it says all of these align with the author's claim regarding the challenges and the efforts of expanding. So either it could be a challenge or an effort. So definitely an effort, definitely an effort, definitely a challenge. C is neither of it becomes our answer. Let's get to the next. The analogy, that is a similarity, between the folk tale Pretty Maid Ibronka and the philosophy can be best inferred to suggest that. So what is it that we can understand? Engaging in philosophy requires confronting difficult and potentially unsettling challenges to gain meaningful insight. Yes, which is why the idea of Ibronka was given in the first place, because that was a very unsettling experience for the author. Make sense? Let's reserve this. Philosophical inquiry involves following complex rules and rituals in order to, okay, we didn't talk about following complex rules. In fact, sometimes it's just easy. So nobody said that it has to be a set of complex rules or rituals. And that's not the reason why Ibronka was talked about. Ibronka was a very eerie tale. So we want to have that idea of unsettling. Early experiences shape one's approach to intellectual challenge, but they do not determine the ultimate success. Okay, it's not about the success. You have to understand the reason why the comparison or the analogy was being drawn with Ibronka was because it was unsettling. There's something very EU about it. The author did not really like the idea, right? And that's how she says that even I feel that currently she's tethered to the same demons. So this can't be. Philosophy primarily serves to engage and captivate the mind, similarly to compelling nature of the folk tales. No, Not any folk tale we are talking about, we're just talking about the one that has been mentioned. So it can't just be a random answer. It will have to have something which is common as of an attribute for both of them. So the answer becomes A. According to the passage, philosophy influences all of the following except. So what is the one thing it does not? Morality, yes. Reality, art, all of these. Genealogy, not so much. So genealogy basically means your progeny. That's not what we've talked about. Nobody's talked about what your ancestral lineage is all about. So that is out of scope altogether, and philosophy has nothing to do with it. So D becomes the answer. This was an easy give. Which of the following statement is not true about the recognition of historical philosophical texts as discussed in the passage? So which of the following is false? Texts by elite authors often conform to the standard style and structure, making them easier to integrate, obviously, which is why the example of the Duchess was given. So this is true. If it is true, it can't be my answer. Expanding the canon sometimes require examining work that differ in style and structure from traditional Western. Of course, that is how you're going to expand the canon. That's how you're going to expand your precinct of philosophy. Makes sense. This is true. Can't be my answer. Any text written outside the Eurosphere automatically qualifies as a philosophical work if it follows conventional philosophical method. No, things don't automatically happen. They have to respectfully and they have to be within the bounds of the philosophical, debate. Only then. So this becomes my answer because this is something that cannot be done. Recognition of philosophical value is influenced by the author's social position and access to education, as seen in historical examples like Margaret Cavendish. Yes, they're privileged, they're entitled people, they have access to it, and which is why this is true. It can't be my answer, which means the correct answer will have to be option C. This was a very easy passage, and I hope you understand all of the questions. And with that, let's move on to the next. Now, beginning with the storyline first. Apparently, the Carthusian monks who distill the herbal liqueur chartreuse have been struggling to maintain a work-life balance. So there's a work-life balance issue. Sales of the drink, which totaled $30 million in 22, continue to bankroll the order. Right? So there have been sales and they're continuing to bankroll. The brothers' vows of solitude and silence have not prevented the company that hawks their wares, Chartio's diffusion from building a global luxury brand. So there have been a lot of vows that the brothers have taken, but nothing has stopped them from building it into a brand. Nonetheless, in January 23, the wholesaler announced their decision to limit supply despite robust demand. A lot of demand was there, but the wholesaler said, I'm going to limit the sales, limit the supply. What would prompt a firm to commit the cardinal sin, cardinal's main, of leaving money on the proverbial table? They know there is money coming. What would keep a company from doing this? The monks stated motives were twofold. They said there are two reasons. Although they expressed a concern with the environmental impact of their operations, the deeper impetus was spiritual. So it was a spiritual reason. As the order reminded frustrated tipplers, they first and foremost are the business of contemplating eternal mysteries. So the first and the foremost is they want to contemplate eternal mysteries. Well, beyond Chartreuse or even Dom Perignon, France has long been associated with a specific version of a good life, from hot cuisines to haute couture. In the global imagination, the French excel not only at putting quality before quantity, but also in distributing the finer things more widely than their Anglophone counterparts. So they're not just about numbers. French, or the people of France, a very important aspect are the kind of people who like putting quality over quantity. So it's the quality of life that matters for them. The French are as famous in their national healthcare system, month-long vacations, and 36-hour working week as they are for bread, wine, and cheese. So they're popular for both the things. That bosses are disallowed by law from requiring any employee to read or respond to work emails after business hour only reinforces the perception that life is meant to be savored. They're very specific. I mean, the bosses will be fined if there is any mail that is being said outside office hours. So that's how specific they are. How then should one approach decisions that appear to exceed the limits of economic rationality? So how do you make a decision? When you know the economics, the numbers are speaking differently. The real task is not to point out some trans-historical tick of the psyche or neuroscientific hack, or to call it a union negotiated day. So the real task is not really either of these. Not only are the politics of such a decision abysmal, but the move also makes for false history, and they can't just do it. It cannot be politically driven, and all of this is just considered to be abysmal. Carthusian might regard themselves as mere pilgrims in the terrestrial sphere, but the corner of the world they presently inhabit sits on southeastern France, a nation that has been roiled in recent months by opposition to the government's plan to reform the pension system by raising the retirement age from 62 to 64. The two developments are related and for reasons that are distinctly Catholic as well as French. So even the retirement age has changed, which is of course a very Catholic reason. Indeed, the monk's willingness to retire from the world of commerce offers a microcosmic glimpse into the motives animating the national fight to retire at an age that allows the enjoying of the fruits of one's labor. So they are doing that. Why? Because money is not really that important for them. It is the quality of life. And retirement has come along, so they'd like to gladly and respectfully enjoy the fruits of the labor that they have. The shared struggle of the Carthusian and the French electorate reveal the ongoing significance not of the axiom set down by Adam Smith, but by one what we call the economic theology. So the reason behind it is the economic theology. In the most literal sense, this term of art connotes an attentiveness to the economic elements of theology as well as the theological vestiges of economic science. So it's about theology. It has some context, some attribute of theology and some attribute of economics. Think of Max Weber's Protestant ethic, but with a different cast of characters and constellation of values. So think of it in a different plot. In a more concrete sense, the economic theology refers to a corpus of work produced by 18th century theologians writing with a conception that the economy was far more expansive than typical usage allows. Economy had a lot more to offer. In contrast to classical political economy, which enshrines its object as an autonomous, purely natural domain of thought and action, French economic theologians described a range of activities aimed at producing and circulating wealth beyond conceived, from the riches contained in consecrated hosts and the power invested in images of the king to the value projected onto and believed to radiate from commodities. So they understood that, in contrast to, of course, these classical political economies, which enshrined its object as autonomous, purely natural domain of thought and action, the French theologians happen to describe it as a range of activities that aim at producing and circulating wealth broadly from the riches constraints. So it's just not something which has to go to the riches. It has to be something that has to be, to everybody. The power invested in the image of the king, of the value projected onto and believed to radiate from commodities. It is the commodities that has to drive it. As I argue in the spirit of French capitalism 2021, this way of figuring the economy can be seen as underwriting a distinctly Catholic ethic that, in construct to Webster's schema, privileged the marvelous over the mundane, consumption over production, and the pleasure of enjoyment over the rigorous, delayed gratification. So this was the motto they lived by. So they understood privileged of the marvelous over the mundane, right? What you have, let the ordinary go. This is what you have to enjoy. Consumption over production, it's the consumption, not really the production that matters. And the pleasures of enjoyment over the rigorous, delayed gratification. It's being able to enjoy the little moments. And that is what the French economic principle was all about. Let's go. Which of the following accurately reflects the motives or the implications of the Carthusian Marx decision to limit Chartreuse supply except? So it says all of these accurately tell us the motives or the reasons as to why they came up with this decision that they want to limit it, except one of it is not a reason. The decision reflects spiritual priorities that place contemplation over financial gains. Of course, this is true. Can't be my answer. Environmental concerns are cited as one of the reasons for limiting. Yes, all of these are specific details said in the passage. True, can't be my answer. The most strategically leverages scarcity to alleviate. There was no scarcity. There was so much supply, and then, of course, they were limiting the demand on purpose. So there was never any scarcity. This is false. Becomes my answer. The decision provides insight into broader French attitudes towards work, leisure, and enjoyment. Yes, this is true. It can't be my answer, which means the only false information is option C. The phrase, the shared struggle of the Carthusian and the French electorate can be best described as all of the following except it was an economic struggle. It was a theological struggle, instrumental struggle, of course not. Instrumental means something which is very important. Of course not. Ethical struggle, yes. So which means the answer will have to be option C. This was once again an easy give. The author's remark about avoiding simplistic psychological or neuroscientific explanation can be best interpreted to mean, so why has he not done that? Complex decision cannot be understood by relying solely on universal or biological explanation. Yes, sometimes you just have to let things take its course. That is what it was, and that is what the French, ideologies were about. It was about being able to just soak yourself in the moment, and that is it. So this makes sense. This can definitely be an answer. Scientific studies of the mind are irrelevant. Let's just bunk this answer here. Policies and agreement should always follow in it. Explicit can't be. Historical and cultural factors are unimportant. Okay. I think there is going to be no other answer, which you will also not be differing at all with me about. And on to the last one for today. Which of the following can be most reasonably inferred about the French economic theology as described in the passage? So what do we understand about their tendencies? It emphasizes enjoyment, consumption, and the marvelous over delayed gratification and purely productive activity. Yes, the last line. I know this says purely, but that is what the last line spoke about. So this captures completely likely to be an answer. Let's see the other ones. It strictly follows the principle of classical political economy. No, it was political economy versus. So it was unlike the political economy is how it was said. This can't be an answer. It is identical to Max Weber's Protestant. No, in fact, towards the end, they went on to the Catholic front. So let's just remove this here itself. And it disregards the social and cultural dimensions of economic activity in favor of abstract. No, they were never in favor of abstract financial matters. It was all about leisure. It was all about being able to live a dignified, happy life. So this also does not become the answer. The correct answer is going to be option A. And with that, we come to an end to two beautiful passages. I hope you could understand the passage, the storyline. If in case there's been any, if you've been short of being able to understand what the passage is, reread the passage again. 100% guarantee that you will understand what the passage is about. I'm going to see you guys very soon with two more hot topics that the consortium likes asking. But until then, please make sure this week is dedicated to the reading of economics and philosophy. You know how to reach out to me if there be any doubt. Please reach out to me on Telegram, and I shall be very glad to be able to cater to your doubts. Thank you for giving me your valuable time. I'm going to see you guys very soon. Until then, keep practicing, because if you're not practicing, you're not going anywhere. Thank you so much, everybody.